What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And in 2021, still 2022, reached out, and 2021 reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world, and feel very blessed about that. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And we are broadcasting live. Black Canada Talking. I had a bit of a cramp for a moment because there's so many epic conversations I host. I got to make sure what I'm doing here. So Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. We also like to highlight Black Canadians that you need to know about. So today we have he's a regular, and he's becoming a great friend, a great comrade associate for the Black Canada family and for Dr. Vibe. But we have Cesar Ndema-Moussa coming up. But before we have him come up, we'll just do a little quick things. Also, if you want to, please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. Why? Because you get notified when we go live with epic conversations like Black Canada Talking, The Morning Vibe, the Dr. Vibe Show, and Say the Things Aisha, Jill, and Lala. Got it? And next up, if you want to advertise your business or service on the Dr. Vibe Show, please email me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. All right, those things are out of the way. And let's have someone come in our way. Cesar is in the house. What is up, Cesar?
Hi, Dr. Vibe. How are you? How's everybody? Thank you for having me out always.
We are always pleased to have you. How is the family doing?
They're doing good. They're doing good. I'm here with you. They're going to get some family visit while we have our conversation.
All right. Excellent. 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 Well, let's get right to it because time doesn't wait for anybody. So, first conversation topic, it is Emancipation Day. And actually, it's also Jamaica's Independence Day, too. 61 years. But on this side of the world, we're talking about Emancipation Day in Canada. And what are Cesar's thoughts on Emancipation Day 2023?
Well, I like how you brought up Jamaica because at the same time as we talk about Emancipation Day, aka the exit of slavery, I want to also commemorate that emancipation doesn't end in 1834. Emancipation must continue even today as Barbados rejecting British monarchy. So I invite Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean nations to follow suit in order to truly be emancipated. And ultimately, emancipation comes from us. It comes from us, and it comes for us in basically affirming truly our identity, our independence. And this is not some type of Pan-Africanist black pride talk. But remember, as long as you don't have a true independence, you are never truly seen as an equal. You see, this is important to understand as so many leaders, black leaders, have talked about it is best to be free, even in poverty, than to be well or rich under bondage. The other thought that I have regarding Emancipation Day, and as we talk about August 1st, in regards to Canada and other basically former British possessions, is the fact that absolutely there was a conversation in terms of should it be a celebration or should it be a commemoration? Because such a tragic event, and I gave here a Jewish example where it is rarely a celebration. January 27, aka the freedom of the Auschwitz concentration camp. It's a commemoration. Um, we as Black people do not have to necessarily honor things of the past as other people do. And by this, I mean we can celebrate and we can commemorate. However, I would want us to be mindful of the fact that while we celebrate, and I give the example of what happened in your city, Dr. Vibe, in Toronto, there was the train, the TTC, the TTC ride where
Freedom Train, yes, the Freedom Train
the
ride
freedom
last
train.
this past Monday. Yes,
Exactly. So while it's great that we celebrate, we should probably put more emphasis on commemoration, not commemoration just in terms of silence, but commemoration in terms of uplifting our community. And I gave you a very concrete example where we must not forget that we have a festival that is coming in this month that used to be, that used to be seen overwhelmingly as Black owned, but is actually white banks owned, aka Caribana.
well,
So
I call it a Maribana because it wouldn't be nothing without Americans, but that's a whole other conversation.
and you see here, even saying Caribana is not even the proper term. We say Caribana out of habit, but it's not exactly the term. Kind of like when you say BET, there's BET in terms of people thinking Black owned, and now thank you to Tyler Perry, it's Black owned anew. But for many years you were saying BET, but it was not representative of Black people, even though the faces on the screen were Black. So
Mm-hmm.
this is what I mean. Our true emancipation is not just to recognize August 1st or to celebrate the Independence Day of said Caribbean or African country. Our true emancipation become in the concrete actions that we lead to truly be independent, so that when we come to the table, we are sitting as equal. And that's why the tiny island Barbados, in rejecting British monarchy, is spearheading reparations of slavery for the Caribbean islands, because they took that bold move. It's not about the size. That small island took an action that made it stand as an elephant in the jungle that's there in terms of geopolitics. So, yes, Emancipation Day, yes, celebration, but we need commemorations. And even further to that, we need to have true independence in terms of our Caribbean and African countries. And as such, we need to continue, as I always say, as I always talk about, continue the uplifting of our Black communities. It is a fundamental problem when people think of a Black event that brings so many people from Canada and the US to Caribana, and yet those who really make the money, those who make the real money, they're not Black, they're not Caribbean, they're not Africans.
I have some conversation piece before we move on to our next topic. Melanated people, when it comes to emancipation, do we need, or do you have a concern that a number of melanated people want emancipation in the eyes of those who are not melanated instead of focusing on emancipation within their own?
Well, your question is excellent, because your question sends us back to a debate in the 1960s between two of the great leaders behind me, Brother Malcolm X, Brother Martin Luther King, because it is the trap of integration. The trap of integration, which leads Black people to come out of segregation. That's a good thing. However, the problem is that the vast majority of our people are happy in integration. They are not trying to uh, keep the flame of the struggle alive to truly be equals, to truly be independent. They basically, for the vast majority of Black people, integration means acceptance. Meanwhile, when you look at other communities, other successful communities, you look at, for example, the Chinese community, there's a Chinatown in every major city. And it's not surprising to see a bank with Chinese characters on display at the forefront. Let us try to imagine seeing a bank, a Canadian bank or an American bank, with Creole or Patois or some African language written at the forefront. Integration doesn't have to mean that you have to just beg for acceptance. Integration can mean I'm coming in as an equal, but for that you have to work on yourself. Too many of our people view the notion of emancipation just as freedom in terms of acceptance from the others, and as such, they become satisfied with crumbs.
Yeah, I just it just seems that I know a number of people. I just think they're they feel emancipation is acceptance by those who don't look like themselves,
Yeah.
and they're not even focusing on emancipating themselves with themselves.
And that's an inferiority complex. That's an inferiority complex because at the same time, uh, I mean, unless you find the white guy in hip hop, or you find the Asian kid who basically I don't know, loves soul food, or some Arab male who fetishizes black women. Non-black people don't care about acceptance by black people because usually they are in a power over dominant position in relation to black people, especially on things that matter, or things that are of strategic issues, or things that are basically power moves, such as in geopolitics. You know, they don't care about acceptance of black people, and they don't have to care about it because they come in with a dominant identity. An example that I often use in trainings and conferences is about how, you know, when we look at, for example, entertainment, we have so many rappers will rap about how horrible the white cops are and how racist white people are. But more often than not, when they reach fame and fortune, or even just a little bit of money, what do they tend to do? They move to the white neighborhood. Meanwhile, we don't see even allies moving to the black neighborhoods. Just as you go to Africa and the Caribbean, whites don't come there to live among blacks into the black neighborhoods. No, they tend to live in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and they prosper and they have the greatest time of their life just as they get rich. And when I say white, you know, I say white beyond Europeans, whether we're talking about Europeans or we're talking about Arabs or we're talking about Jewish people. So it's important to understand for our people that emancipation does not stop at a date of 1834. It doesn't stop at August 1st or Black History Month. Emancipation is a daily thing to truly be free. And as such, it's one of the criticisms that I address to people who look at Brother Martin Luther King in terms of saying that he got fooled or he got bamboozled. Well, no, he didn't, because he eventually, you know, when you live in the heat of the moment, the struggle is segregation, coming out of segregation. But then too many people talk about Brother Martin Luther King in terms of, you know, the 1963 speech, I Have a Dream. That is a dream of integration. But how many of our people even talk, even share his 1967 speech, I'm black and beautiful and proud? They don't. This is a speech to go beyond integration. This is a speech to always keep alive, you know, black pride, to Brother Martin Luther King embrace black power. You know, it's not just black empowerment, but it's to basically come at the table with the notion of power. The notion of power does not mean you hate the other. The notion of power does not mean that, you know, you're coming with a gun. It means that you're coming with the integrity of yourself, of your demands, and that you are working on yourself to always improve your fate. I celebrate the success of other minority communities, such as Chinese, Indian, Jewish, etc., who have succeeded to climb out of the oppression of white supremacy, but they're still working on themselves. And as much as it's true that they have been greatly helped, notably by white supremacy or by white elites, we have to say they have been helped. Sure, us black people are no longer living under official segregation, under official slavery, under official colonization. So, you know, like the expression says, just as when you point the finger at someone or at something, there are also fingers pointing back at you. And that's the most important part. What are you doing to improve your fate, to uplift yourself?
Well put. Well put. We'll move on to our next conversation piece. You're watching Black Canada Talking, hanging out with Cesar Ndema-Moussa, who's becoming a regular here when he has time from his growing one and all the other things he's up to. So, and
Thank you.
this one, yeah, and Cesar and I, we were going back and forth via email today. I really did not have an idea about this next story till he brought it to my attention, and I dug into a little bit more. This is a very important story. So let's bring this one up. And Cesar, Niger between military coup and democracy. So if you can give us a little background to our audiences, a lot of people may not know, they may not even know about the country, Niger, and why, what has happened, and why is this of importance?
Dr. Vibe, our brothers and sisters who are listening, and notably the children listening, I really hope the parents bring this to the attention of the children. What's happening in Niger is fundamental. When I say fundamental, I will go, as you asked for me to bring the background. It would be unpleasant to some of our people to hear this in terms of background, but it's capital, it's fundamental for us to know, to pay attention to what's happening in Niger, because as we are in 2023, what's happening in Niger, to my basically estimations, my knowledge, is a fundamental question of the 21st century in regards to Black nations. The background of what's happening in Niger actually goes back to 2011, when France, under Nicolas Sarkozy, Great Britain under Tony Blair, but also the USA under Barack Obama, basically came together and fomented the fall of the Libyan dictator, Muammar Gaddafi. It's very important to understand this, and I know many of our Black people love Barack Obama, and I myself am proud to say I was part of the International Corps of Volunteers who went to Detroit to help to his election in 2008. Yet, Obama himself, so as you see Obama behind me here, Obama himself admitted that the intervention in Libya must be his greatest international political blunder. He basically failed there. Why? The falling of Gaddafi unleashed to the north thousands upon thousands of migrants, notably dying in the Mediterranean Sea. But to the south, it unleashed terrorism. Call it Islamic terrorism, call it whatever you want to call it, but it unleashed a wave of terrorism, which notably has contributed to the dismantling of peace and security in the countries of the Sahel. The countries of the Sahel are basically the Saharan desert, the countries there, and Niger is one of them. So when the military coup happened in Niger, we're talking basically just a matter of a week ago, the military coup by General Tiani, if I get the name right, Abdurrahman Tiani, if I'm correct, basically in leading this military coup, it becomes a question where indeed there was a democratically elected president, President Mohamed Bazoum. So why would he be getting toppled over? Well, Africa is unfortunately becoming a battleground of Western versus Eastern nations, a battleground between the former white colonizers, so the European nations, and we can say the United States. I mean, Niger has an American base on its soil and has French bases as well. I want someone to tell me what European country has an African base on its soil. What American nation has an African base on its soil? No. At the same time, Niger provides to France, it is estimated that Niger provides up to 15% of French uranium for its energy and up to 20% of the uranium of the European Union. And just as we see with the conflict in Ukraine, and we notably saw that last year, conflicts are very much driven by the demands and the cost of energy. Now, in the question of Niger, even 10 years ago, Oxfam, the international advocacy group, a human rights advocacy group, estimated that up to three quarters, or 2/3 or 3/4, I don't remember the specific number. I read many reports. 2/3 to 3/4 of French people were getting their electricity thanks to Niger, which is the second provider of uranium to France after Kazakhstan, the world leader in uranium production. But 90% of people in Niger did not have electricity. Niger is constantly one of the poorest and least educated countries in the world, which also gives fertile ground for the growth of Islamism. And remember, last time on the show, notably with my friend Khan, we talked about how the lack of education, the failure on education, but also the growth of poverty are fertile grounds, not so much to Islam as a religion, but to Islamism as an extremist side of the religion. So this is basically what leads to such in terms of, basically seeing that you have a country which ground is very rich. If I'm correct, the fourth uranium producer in the world. And uranium is, you don't have nuclear industry without uranium. It's that simple. So on paper, Niger should be one of the richest countries in the world, just as when we talk about a country called Democratic Republic of Congo and so many other African countries. Rich soil, but poor population. And it's important to also understand this, and this is very fundamental. While we're having a reawakening, a further growth of Black consciousness, of Pan Africanism in Africa, notably denouncing the very unequal trades accords, military agreements between African countries and Western nations. It is not an excuse to open the door to what I consider the new colonizers, whether we talk about Russia, China, or others, will also tend to benefit from unequal agreements. I mean, when we have basically a mercenary group such as Wagner, and I think most of our listeners have heard about the attempted coup by the Wagner boss Prigozhin against Putin. When you have a mercenary group that basically becomes so important on foreign ground, what do they take out of it? They benefit from the mineral extractions. It's not the population. And last but not least, I have to mention this. Canada, I believe it was just yesterday, has cut aid to Niger. But
Yep.
to be specific, Canada has cut aid to the government of Niger as such, from democratic government to now the military government. But at this point, Canada is maintaining assistance to vulnerable populations. We will see how long it lasts, but it would also seem, from what I hear from a Pan-Africanist activists, the majority of the population support the military coup, notably because France, just as America, have failed so far, but they have failed to stop the terrorist attacks. And yet today, as we are coming at the end of the day, so technically in that part of the world, in Africa, we're talking about it's 10:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. The ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, had issued an ultimatum of a week to the military coup of General Tiani to put back in power President Bazoum or risk military intervention. This would be a terrible thing in Africa, where we would have a regional conflict between some nations, ranging with the military leaders of Niger, so nations being Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. And I even read on certain pages talk about Algeria. Algeria saying it would support the military coup in Niger. Something important about Algeria, although Algeria is very much at the north, and we can talk about the Maghrebi, it's not a black leadership, etc. Algeria is arguably the first or second military power in Africa. It tends to usually be a question between Algeria and between Algeria and Egypt and
Right.
or Nigeria. But Algeria is always top three military in Africa. And we basically know this desire of military intervention, although ECOWAS has already brought forward military intervention to put back democracy in Africa. Here, we know very well that it's greatly pushed by France and the USA in order to bring down the military coup. So there are so many elements to understand here, because what's happening in Niger, we can foresee it will happen again. It has happened before. Like I said, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. It will happen again because populations are expanding. There's an African population boom, but poverty is also there. There is an unequal wealth redistribution. Yes, corruption and nepotism, but also geopolitics, neocolonialism, the concept of France Afrique, which keeps down the former French colonies, but also the environment, global warming, making conditions harder for populations, making agriculture harder. What does that mean? Hungry people will tend to become angry people. So
Yeah. There's so many things going on with Africa, especially, I think we talked about last time, of the Chinese imperialism, Russia imperialism, American imperialism. Why is Niger a key player when it comes to the strength of the African continent? Sorry.
Absolutely, because Niger. So you have to see where Niger is on the map. Niger is landlocked. It is not a coastal country, so it depends notably on Benin and other countries in order to have from food to machinery to medicine coming in. But at the same time, Niger is a Sahel country, basically. So this is, in terms of history, part of the oppression of the Africans. So our ancestors is greatly due to geographical isolation. The Sahara was a hardly penetrable desert, the greatest desert in the world in terms of landmass. But at the same time, Niger is rich in uranium, but there's also a matter of proximity. So when I tell you that Kazakhstan is the world #1 producer in uranium, well, you have to look where Kazakhstan is in comparison to Europe versus where Niger is in comparison to Europe. Niger is basically just underneath Europe on the map. Kazakhstan is where Russia is, below Russia on the map. So in the world of energy talks, where energy demands are actually growing, despite all the talk about global warming, and let's not forget something very important here. There is new type of technology and industries that are coming. We're talking about artificial intelligence, but we're also talking about such things. Most of our people don't know this, but mining exploration of the moon, and eventually mining exploration beyond the moon, space industry, a space age exploration. All of this will require massive energies. Uranium will become absolutely even more necessary, not just for nuclear plants such as Fukushima in Japan in 2011, but we're talking here about the need for nuclear energy to go to space, to explore, to settle colonies. Niger becomes an absolutely key pivotal player also in terms of where it is situated. So right now there's a French company, Orano, formerly called Areva, in all three major sites in Niger. They own over 60% stake. You understand it's France. They employ, so on the good side, they say they employ, I think it's 90 or even up to 99% of of employees coming from Niger. But what's the redistribution of wealth? What are the policies in terms of the development of the country? Because as we've seen time and again, I mean, you look at a country such as and I take the example of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is basically paradoxically talking, the richest country in terms of minerals on earth. It's a democratic country. Yet look at the situation in the country. It's a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. Our very cell phones come from there due to the exploitation of children. So these type of situations will grow. Today we're talking about Niger. We will talk about another country. But notice that whole land mass where we have Niger, we have Mali, Burkina Faso, we have Chad, we have Sudan. It is not accidental. It's basically a lot of it's autocratic governments, autocratic military governments, but we can't talk about democracy in Africa without talking about true independence, without talking about redistribution of wealth, without talking about the richness of the land, of the minerals, and without talking about the redistribution, not only to the people, but in terms of a sense of pride, a sense of identity. Because if not, more and more thousands of people, of Africans, will be dying in the Mediterranean Sea seeking for a better life.
Absolutely.
It's in the interest of
Absolutely.
Western nations to want African nations to become richer and more prosperous. For all that, I've always said it, I support for Black people to spread all over the world. Why not? There are Chinese communities all over the world. So there should be African Black communities all over the world just as well.
Makes sense. Makes
Absolutely.
sense. Excellent. Excellent thought process and sharing out by Cesar on Black Canada Talking. We're going to take a quick little break. And when we come back, Cesar is going to talk about, I call him 45, the former president of the United States and the state of democracy in 2023. 45 was charged again this past week. But Cesar wants to expand the conversation about not only that, but the state of democracy as we speak. So we'll be back in a few moments.
And that's what I feel like. You feel like you're the Harriet Tubman of the mind.
I am.
I feel like I'm I'm one of the Harriet Tubmans of intelligent Black people. Like, I want to liberate y'all from like being left behind and ignored and oblivion. No, really, the rappers get all the attention. Seriously, does anybody else feel this way? Like ignorant Black people, they'll be all up, getting all the headlines on the Shade Room.
Overly sexualized Black folks.
Like the twerkers and the just people that don't always represent the best of us. The diversity. Like people like Dr. Vibe. Like everybody should know about people like Dr. Vibe. Dr.
Really
Vibe he's trying to do good work for Black people.
Dr. Vibe from Toronto. Good to see you, my brother. Dr. Vibe. Everybody follow Dr. Vibe. He has a great show. He's very good at what he does, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, so let me hop into this. What's up, Dr. Vibe? How you doing? Everybody, if you see Dr. Vibe in the chat, everybody go follow the Dr. Vibe show. Dr. Vibe is a real smart brother and a good human being. I like the guy a lot, and he's very intelligent. And I think everyone should pay attention to what he's got going on. We got to shine the spotlight on the intelligent Black people out here that are really doing the good work. Don't just pay attention to the rappers and the celebrities. A lot of these people are losers. Your true winners are your people in your community that are really having your back. Helping us to have stronger families and a stronger community. So Dr. Vibe is in that category. So you might see the Dr. Vibe show in this chat. If you see him, please go follow him. Okay. All right. So anyway.
All right. We are back on Black Canada Talking with Cesar Ndema-Moussa and just catching up. And for people who want to find out more about Cesar, this is where you can get a hold of him. You can get a hold of him on Facebook, and you also can get a hold of him via email at president@rootsandculturecanada.com. So that's where you can get a hold of him. Just wanted to give him a little bit of a break before we get to our next conversation topic today. And the former president of the United States was charged again with more stuff last week in federal court, being, I guess, involved to the January 6th tried takeover of the American government. And Cesar wants to talk about that, but also wants to talk about the state of democracy. Cesar, go for it.
Well, you said it very well. Basically, 45 again. So first of all, something I think our people have to understand, and allow me to quote a great modern philosopher in the name of Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent. When 50 Cent had said, you wanted an entertainer president, well, you got one. It has come to my absolute conviction that Donald Trump cares more about being in the news than about what or why he's in the news. Kind of in the mantra of marketing, that there's no bad publicity, it's what you do about it. And as such, like he said himself this week in the news, all he needs is another indictment, basically a fourth one, and he wins the Republican nomination. Because when you look in terms of 45, well, first of all, we were just talking about Niger, but we could be talking about America as well. Last year, when half of the women in America, especially in red states, lost abortion rights. Wow. It's easy to look at Afghanistan and say, oh, the poor women over there have no rights. But look at America in the 21st century, how the rights of so many minorities, women just as women, but also blacks, LGBTQ, they're losing rights that they thought were granted. So democracy is never a finished process. You should never take it for granted. In terms of Donald Trump, it's easy to see him as an individual, to see him in terms of the head of the spear. But Donald Trump is part of an entire movement of erosion of democracy in America. He is basically I almost want to say the gatekeeper. They just needed someone to become president and open basically the wave. And you see the cowardice, of the vast majority of the Republican candidates who are unwilling to call him out, because they're hoping for his 37 to 60%, depending on which statistics you look at, of supporters in the Republican base to basically follow them once Trump becomes ineligible, if that's possible, to run for presidency. And when I say if possible, because I heard that he literally can continue running for presidency even if he's jailed. So Trump also helps to highlight, not only exposes white privilege at a level never seen before, but he also helps to highlight the dysfunctions of American institutions, of American democracy. The democracy that we thought was the most solid on earth is basically being brought down, hacked down by one single man because of the privilege of his whiteness, being a man. I would say Christian, but we remember how he held the Bible upside down, and with his long series of marriages, infidelities, and we have to add sexual offenders. Even by taking the Bible as a reference point, he's not a very good Christian. He's not a Christian at all, to be quite honest. He doesn't care about Christianity, but he basically brings down the entire state of democracy in America. And we live in a year when democracy is actually losing ground. The most powerful democracy was America. But even when we look at other Western nations, such as, for example, France right now has, under the government of President Macron, is having some of its major laws being passed by a constitutional law called 49.3, le 49.3. 49.3. What that basically means is that you can enforce a law instead of the expected, democracy rule of majority and consultation by people. No, because you are the one in power, you have the majority of the votes, you can enforce a law. This is why you had the situation in France of the yellow jackets just before COVID, and why you had just last month the riots in regards to the retirement age. And when we look at the other democracy in the world, the biggest democracy in terms of number of citizens, aka India is under the presidency of Narendra Modi, who is from a right-wing extremist party, which is basically pushing the idea of Hindu nationalism with the BJP party. So Trump, in his desire of being a kind of an oligarch, an autocrat, and he never denied that he admires people like Putin of Russia, President Xi of China, and even a certain Kim Jong-il from North Korea. Trump is literally bringing down American democracy. And Why is it important that we talk about it? Well, I think as Black people, and I say this again and again, I repeat myself, but you need to repeat yourself for many years to say the same speech for many years to people for them to awaken. It's very dangerous for our Black communities. It's very dangerous for our Black communities because this white supremacist president, first of all, let us not forget that we had a lot of Black pastors, a lot of Black, how can I put it, Uncle Ruckus pastors who went to basically bless him when they got invited to the White House. It's a fundamental problem that we have a Black church, and this is factually proven, that has espouses a lot of notions from white supremacy, and that goes to celebrate a white supremacist president who has a long history of racism going back to the 70s and culminating notably with the exonerated five, aka our Central Park brothers, and also his racism towards President Obama. Furthermore, if Trump further continues to bring down democracy, what do you think will happen? I absolutely expect more violence from his fans. The so-called Make America Great Again. When was America ever great? Not only for Black people, for women, for LGBTQ, but even when you look at the average white person, it wasn't. But we know Donald Trump fans don't care about facts and evidence. It's a rhetoric, it's a cult of personality, it's a character failure. And in saying such, it's important that we also understand that how do we explain that we have Black people supporting a man with decades of racism towards Black people? It's a reflection of our own community. And I'm not here just talking about a certain Kanye West or Kundis Owens. I really call them Coons. I absolutely don't hide how I view those two people, Candace and Kanye. But how is it that we have so many of our people who openly support such a person who does not hide the fact that unless you're rich and famous, if you're Black, he looks down on you. Unless you're rich and famous. Trump, of course, he will love taking a photo with Mike Tyson. But come on. Mike Tyson, no disrespect, call me elitist, call me anything you want. Nobody thinks of Mike Tyson in terms of identity and intellectual conversation. Yet Trump becomes president. That's white privilege. Of course, he would love to take a photo with Muhammad Ali, but unless you're rich, unless you're Black and famous, if you're Black, Trump has shown it for years, he will look down on Black people. So, besides the fact that he looked at African countries as shithole countries, and I have to say, he was partly right. But we know he didn't say shithole countries from a geopolitical analysis, as when I talk about it. He said it from a racial lens. So it's not Trump the individual. And as we say this, the first indictment, criminal indictment coming from Prosecutor Bragg. This coming week, there's bound to be another indictment from the sister prosecutor in Georgia regarding the recorded tapes of his collusion and attempt to corrupt another Republican official. This is the extent, the impact upon us Black people. My Black people, let us be very careful. It's not about Trump as an individual. The state of democracy and what it brings, and we can see right here in Canada, with the so-called Freedom Convoy, with a certain Pierre Poilievre going to support the Freedom, D-U-M-B, riders, and him wanting to become prime minister. It's a vast conversation, my friends. It's not just about Trump.
So what do you feel melanated individuals can do with the state, with the, like, you're not painting a pretty picture right now, the state of democracy right now.
It's not.
What would you suggest or provide some, do you have any suggestions what melanated individuals can do to at least hold the tide instead of getting bowled over by the tide?
It's easy to see me coming. Yeah, empower Black communities, Black pride, learn about Black history, have our children, know about the roots and culture. My 2-year-old daughter, she goes from high five to fist bump, with the finger up like her dad, to Wakanda forever and Black power. And she's 2 years old. That's great. Let's push it further. Let's look at our heroes of the past, what they did. Let's look at the Black Panthers, how they organized the communities. Let us promote Black owned and Black run firearms group in terms of learning how to hold and use firearms for self-defense. And I say and repeat, for self-defense. Let us make sure, as our great leader Thomas Sankara said, a soldier without a political consciousness is a dangerous weapon to all. Let us make sure that we do raise sisters and boys who want to become cops, who want to serve in public administration, but who do have a Black consciousness. Let us promote people such as Supreme Court Judge Ketanji Brown, will come there. I mean, I know some brothers won't like this because they will say, oh, she's a feminist, she's a Black feminist. So what? She has Black consciousness, and I support our sister for that. Let us be there to support our own people who, for survival in white spaces, must wear masks. As our great hero, the psychiatric Frantz Fanon, talked about Black people needing to wear masks to survive in white spaces. Black people, Black professionals will need to wear masks, but also have to dare be Black and proud. Let us support one another so that we can create better communities, and not communities, as we were talking at the very beginning, of people who will consider integration or emancipation as a constant begging for acceptance. Because it's the same thing that happens, notably, as we were talking about Niger and those other countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea, just as Niger, those military leaders, one of the things that they always talk about is that they're tired of seeing democratic elected African leaders go beg Westerners for crumbs. It's the same thing that we do in our communities. Let us empower ourselves that we can be, as I am here. I'm a Black professional. I'm a senior leader in my sector. I'm a consultant to senior leaders, and yet I hold a Black and proud speech. It's not hidden. It's not about me. Just as my traditional earrings are here, and I wear my shades for medical purposes, but we know very well nobody looks at a Black man with shades and thinking it must be a medical issue. And yet, that's me in the office. That's me in the conference and training rooms. And that's me proudly talking about the leaders that you see behind me, talking about Frantz Fanon and Cheikh Anta Diop, talking of Thomas Sankara and Patrice Lumumba, just as of Marcus Garvey and Stokely Carmichael. So basically, we have to have these people, because when we have these Black people with a Black mindset who are unapologetically Black, it becomes a natural conclusion that we must empower our communities. It's not about Cesar. Who am I? It's not about Dr. Vibe. Who are you? It's about our community. It's the reason why, as I've said, as you know, as we all know, it's the reason why under a certain Rudy Giuliani, mayor of NYC, it was revealed that the police had official notes that they could harass, beat, and kill Blacks and Latinos, but hands off on Jewish and Chinese communities. It's not an accident. It's not an accident in the same way as when we talk about geopolitics, you will not see George Bush or Barack Obama at the International Tribunal at the International Penal Tribunal for war crimes against Iraq or Libya, you will never see them there. You will never see, for those of our Black people who support the cause of Palestine, you will never see an Israeli prime minister there. Power relations, notably based on identity and notably based on who you associate and you connect with. When we dare to be Black and proud, with balance, because some of our Black people become a little bit extremist in the way that they even foment and create whatever kind of logic. But when you are Black and proud and you are professional and you conduct yourself well in terms of the Eurocentric lenses, but conduct yourself well in terms of honoring your ancestors, creating a path for your descendants, you're helping the whole community. And this is where it starts. And it doesn't matter whether you're light skinned or dark skinned. It doesn't even matter if you have, some people will say it's controversial, if you have a white or non-Black partner, you will be seen first and foremost as Black, and so will be your family. So that Black consciousness must be there in uplifting Black women, Black men, Black children. And that means uplifting the Black community and Black nations.
Okay. That could have been a close, but we have one more conversation topic, and we're speaking with Cesar Ndema-Moussa on Black Canada Talking. Again, if you want to get in contact with him, there's his Facebook information, and there he is, email President Roots and Culture Canada. And our final conversation topic is, when this came out, the first person I wanted to chat with about this subject was Cesar. And this subject is growing in noise. I don't mean but it's growing. And this whole subject about the former principal who sued the Toronto District School Board, allegedly bullying during anti-racism training, dies by suicide. The story started to surface about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's growing. That's to the point where it's being covered by a number of publications in the United States, especially Fox News in the United States. Mm-hmm. And then now it's come to the point where I live in the province of Ontario, where this unfortunate incident happened. The Ontario government now is taking a look at maybe changing or maybe pulling anti-Black racism training to government employees because of this event. And again, first things first, we want to express our condolences to the family of the gentleman who took his life. First and foremost, no, we don't want anyone taking their life. Before Cesar comments a little bit further, I just want to put up a quick story that was at a CBC website and I just want to read a bit of it. So we're just waiting for it to come up on our screen here. So I'll actually take this down a little bit. So I'll just read a little bit of this story for our audience. And an anti-racism trainer accused of denigrating a Toronto principal who later died by suicide says she welcomes the Ontario Education Minister's review. Earlier this week, Minister Stephen Lessay called the allegations raised by Richard Biltzko, quote, serious and disturbing, unquote, and says he's asked his staff to review what happened and bring him, quote, options to reform the professional training and strengthening accountability on school boards so this never happens again, unquote. Kojo Institute CEO Kike Ojo-Thompson said the accusations are false and mischaracterize what happened at the 2 training sessions in 2021 attended by Richard Biltzko. And if I get his last name wrong, it's my head, not my heart. Just want to read a little bit more of this story. Biltzko filed a lawsuit against the Toronto District School Board earlier this year, claiming supervisors failed to intervene and then retaliated against him when Ojo-Thompson allegedly implied he was racist, and when he disagreed, Canada was more racist than the United States. Later, using the exchange as an example of how white supremacy is upheld through resistance, Biltzko's lawyer publicly linked the incident to his death earlier this month. In a statement posted on Thursday night, Ojo-Thompson calls Biltzko's death a tragedy and offers her condolences to his family. She says the incident has been weaponized to discredit and suppress the work of people committed to diversity equity and inclusion, noting her and her team have been subjected to threats and online vitriol. So Cesar, for those who don't know him, has been very involved in equity, diversity training for many years. So I'd love to get not only what he thinks about the story, but just what he thinks about the story and just all the stuff that's gone on. Because again, Fox News in the United States has been on this big time right-wing publication, but it was in the Toronto Star, which is center or center-left publication, actually released the tapes of what was said, and it gave a different picture than what was reported. So Cesar, I'm so happy that you can make some time to chat about this. Go ahead.
And thank you so much. I have to give you credit, Dr. Vibe, because you're the one who did bring this conversation to today, to our conversation of today. So also, thank you to you for giving condolences to the family, because here, beyond suicide, we have to talk about mental health. We have to acknowledge the plight of mental health and how it can lead to suicide. That said, I want to be very adamant in giving my support to our sister, Kika Ojo, in terms of this trial and tribulation of which she is a victim of. The release of the tape of that training, the conversation basically make it that I am sorry to say, but this must be said. White fragility is not an excuse in order to review and to cancel anti-racism training. Because if it was to be so, and notably as this story goes all the way to the United States and Fox News, then where is that outrage when mental health leads to gunshots and they are not willing to review and cancel the sale and the free trade of firearms in the United States that kills so many, notably by suicide? So there is a great hypocrisy of those on the right, of those who suffer white fragility, of those who are willing to do so much revisionism in terms of history. And I don't just mean Florida governor and Republican candidate Ron DeSantis, but I'm talking even right here in Canada, those who minimize the plight of slavery and Canada's racist immigration policies just as ongoing systemic racism. This principal did not commit suicide because of the training. First of all, it's important to indicate that the suicide came 2 years after the training. A lot of things can have happened in this man's life in 2 years. And although it is easy to point out that, to allege bullying at the anti-racism training, well, I'm sorry to say this. How many people have committed suicide? How many white people have committed suicide following an anti-racism training? I can't think of anyone. I cannot think of anyone. And the release of the tapes clearly indicates that it was an educational moment that one should have embraced, because it is very much Canadian racism to always point to the United States and say we're not as bad as them, as a way to basically avoid addressing racism in Canada. So yes, our sister Kika Ojo was correct in pointing out that, hold on a minute, just because the United States had Jim Crow doesn't mean that Canada was a paradise. Because even when we talk about the Underground Railroad, wow, a little thing that most people don't know, and I had the honor of translating the African Canadian history book, Trailblazers, which can be found basically online. I translated it to French. Well, the Underground Railroad, yes, it brought freedom to slaves to come to Canada, but there are also some who went back to the United States because of how racist Canada was. You know, we have to be able to have this conversation. We have to stop this Canadian hypocrisy of always pointing basically to the US in terms of saying they are so much worse than us. No. So if this teacher truly claimed basically beyond suing the Toronto District School Board, but truly claims that the feeling of being bullied at an anti-racism training led to a suicide. Well, where is all the white outrage for all those people killed by firearms? And there's mental health and suicide involved. Why is it that we don't have more restrictive gun laws and even forbid firearms in those communities in the United States? Why is it that Fox News cares so much, and yet every week there's a mass shooting in the United States that notably involves children? But the famous Second Amendment and the right to bear arms become paramount to any initiative. But here, because it's anti-racism, and how dare you want us to feel guilty because of the past? It wasn't me, it was the ancestors. Or the language of color blindness. I don't see color. No. Anti-Black racism must continue. Equity, diversity, and inclusivity must continue. The demographic landscape is changing, and this is what these white conservatives, that's what they fear. They don't like the changes that are happening, demographics, in culture, in economics, and they're trying to hold on to the past. When they say make America great again, great for who? When we see Canadians embarking on the Freedom Convoy, it's not for any freedom. It's for white privilege. It's for white privilege. If they really cared about freedom, they would be there supporting indigenous communities to be better. They don't care about indigenous communities. They don't care about Black refugees. They don't care about the Canadian involvement in Africa and in the world in terms of, is Canada truly helping to improve the fate of other countries, notably in poverty? They don't care about Haiti. No. It's about white privilege. It's about basically keeping the status quo. And that's why they hate on these type of trainings that force them. This training don't even force them to change the policies. It forces them to reflect, to address concrete issues, and to see the value in becoming progressive to the times that we live in, to the fact that this is integration. Integration requires work, but integration requires addressing equity. It requires addressing diversity. And this is where I teach, and it's in my title, Regional Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity. I teach inclusivity. I don't teach inclusion. I teach inclusivity. Very fundamental difference.
My brother, good way to end it off. I want to say thank you for taking the time to address that subject today. And anytime you want to continue to talk about that, you have a home and place here. I want to thank you as always for taking the time to share with us. There's Cesar's contact information, Facebook and email. I know we're going to see you soon. And thank you for going a little bit more than usual, because I know you got usually a hard stop, but I'm glad the lady of the house allowed you to do it today. So
thank you.
Anything you'd like to tell us that you're going to be involved in the near future?
No, I'm right now conducting an environmental scan, environmental and workplace culture scan of an organization. It takes a lot of time, but it's absolutely necessary in order to uproot and address the issues from discrimination to bullying to workplace malpractices, etc., that occur, basically requiring to have a conversation with each and every staff. So interviews that can go from 30 minutes to 3 hours per person.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
It's
wow.
Naively, I thought it would take me 15 to 20 minutes because technically I only have 5 questions. The first one being, how are you? The last one being, if you have any questions for me. So it's really 3 questions.
Okay.
But there is a reason why I'm the one conducting it, because the sub questions, the peeling off the layers like an onion, the taking down the mask, the addressing the work-life balance, and also the psycho-emotional lenses of the staff. So people come in the office and they're like, oh, I don't want to be here, or this is only going to take a few minutes. And suddenly 2 hours have passed. 3 hours have passed. And There are a lot of tiers, but I want to really honor all of the staff. Nobody is making me feel like they're wasting my time, and they can't, because I mean, I would basically stop it. But I want to honor the staff because it's not about an agency being so toxic, but it's very much about the fact of taking time to give people the opportunity to take off the mask and to speak the truth. To basically have a listening ear. And I think every workplace, every family, we must say as well, every workplace, but also every family would benefit from truthful conversations of what goes on inside and how it impacts individuals. It's not just a matter of saying therapy. It's not just a matter of saying, as in our Black community, go to church, go to the mosque. No, it's about, do we have spaces where people truly feel safe?
I would just add to what you said. I like to say safe and brave.
There you go.
Safe and brave. And
this is everywhere where I go, that's what I try to create. And I tell people all the time, there's no such a thing as a safe space. Like I remind people all the time, most people say the home is a safe space. And I tell them, well, what if you have a child who is LGBTQ? Do they really feel safe at home? What if you have a family where one child is darker than the others? Do they really feel safe? What if you have a child who's a little bit chubby or straight up fat? Do they really feel safe at home? Etc., etc. What if you have that child or that adult in the family that has always been outed for being different, no matter how you want to claim different? So it's about trying to create safer spaces in order to have better, I dare to say, better balanced individuals who can truly be themselves in the skin. Whatever that skin, the outer layer, in terms of skin color or gender or whatever you want to call it, no matter what that skin looks like.
remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Thank you. Take care. All right, everybody. And just leaving his contact information up on the screen there. Thank you so much. That was a great conversation, a great ending. And let's start winding it down. So I'll say you can watch replays of this show on the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and on my website, the drvibeshow.com. As always, please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. Also subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also, too, if you want to advertise your business or service on this show, on any of the epic conversations I host, please email me, dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. As always, we end off with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Thank you for watching or listening live on the replay. It's appreciated and not taken for granted. God bless. Peace and well. Keep the faith and walk good.
Listen.